Christmas Eve at the Aspen Mansion. One by one, they opened Patek watches, Range Rover keys, and fund shares. I was the only one left empty-handed. My billionaire grandfather approached, placing a wine-red velvet box in my hand. He whispered, "This will make the truth reveal itself." My stepmother's red nails froze. Her face went pale, like ink spilled on fresh snow. "My name is Isabel Duke. I am 31 years old. I am also, currently, freezing. The grand hall of the Aspen estate is always kept 5 degrees too cold. It is a calculated chill, a Hartman family signature, designed to remind you that this air, this view of the snow-devouring peaks, this entire sanitized mountain, belongs to them. The cold is a statement of wealth so profound it can afford to be uncomfortable. I work as a senior risk investigator for Northline Quantitative, a fintech consortium where my entire job is to locate the rot beneath the polished veneer of billion-dollar deals. It is a skill I did not learn in college. I learned it right here, in this glass and timber cathedral, long before I had a professional title for it. This is my mother's family, the Hartmans. They control a staggering portion of Colorado's high-altitude real estate, an empire of snow and stone built from scratch by my grandfather, Harold Hartman. He is the patriarch, the eye of the storm, sitting by the massive, walk-in fireplace, watching the night's proceedings with an avian stillness. He is the only source of warmth in the room, and even that is a calculated, distant heat. The party, however, is not his. The party, the guest list, the seating chart, and the very air we breathe are all orchestrated by my stepmother, Vivian Crestwood. Vivian married my father, Greg, 2 years after my mother, Harold's daughter, died. She didn't just marry into the family, she executed a hostile takeover of its emotional infrastructure. She controls the etiquette, the social calendars, and increasingly, the flow of Hartman capital through my father. To Vivian, I am not a stepdaughter. I am a loose end. I am the living, breathing reminder of the first wife. I am a non-performing asset, as I once overheard her describing me to my father during a discussion about trust allocations. And tonight, Christmas Eve, is Vivian's masterpiece, the annual gift ceremony. It is not an act of generosity. It is a public declaration of value, a brutal, real-time audit of where everyone stands in the family's invisible ledger. Vivian presides. Her voice is smooth and sharp as sculpted ice, reading names from thick, embossed cards. "Trenton, darling." My half-brother, Trent, surges forward. At 28, he possesses an unearned, explosive confidence that the world mistakes for competence. He is all gelled hair, $1,000 sneakers, and the lazy smirk of someone who has never faced a consequence. Vivian hands him a slim, dark, impossibly heavy box, a Patek Philippe, a Nautilus, if I am not mistaken, one with a waiting list of at least 8 years, unless you are a Hartman. He barely glances at the watch face before strapping it on, a gesture of pure acquisition. And, Vivian continues, her voice glowing with largesse, "Your father and I have reviewed the proposal. We are approving the second-round seed funding for your new EV startup. The wire will hit your account on Monday." Trent smirks, raising his champagne flute not to Vivian, but across the room to my father, who beams back, his face rosy with pride and expensive scotch. "Sabrina, my sweet." My half-sister, Sabrina, who is 19, drifts toward the tree. She is a cloud of engineered beauty and expensive perfume, her every movement calculated for maximum angelic effect. Her gift is a small, velvet pouch. Inside, a set of keys. "Oh, Mommy, you didn't," she whispers, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "A new Range Rover, darling. The metallic gray one you pointed out," Vivian says. "It is parked out front. We felt you needed something safer for the mountain roads." The bow on the hood, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, is large enough to gift-wrap a horse. "And," Vivian adds, touching Sabrina's cheek, We've spoken to the agency. Your new modeling contract includes a discretionary fund for your brand development and travel. We have already made the initial deposit to get you started. Sabrina emits a high, thin squeal of delight, the sound sharp and painful in the cavernous room. She has learned, much better than I, that performative gratitude is the currency of this house. I sit perfectly still, my spine is straight, my hands folded loosely in my lap. I am used to this. I am the void that gives their extravagance shape. I am the necessary shadow that makes their light seem brighter. The room is filled with extended family, business partners, and the kind of smiling sociopaths who measure loyalty in interest rates. They are all watching. They know the script. This is the part of the show where the lights go down on the main act and the stagehand is briefly, awkwardly visible. And finally, Vivian says, her voice dropping all its manufactured warmth, Isabel. She scans the sea of glittering boxes and silk bags beneath the towering Douglas fir. She frowns, a tiny, perfect wrinkle of confusion, as if she has forgotten something. Then, yes. She retrieves the last item. It is not a box. It is not wrapped in silk. It is a single, cream-colored envelope. She does not get up. She holds it out for me to retrieve. I stand, walk the 20 feet of Persian silk rug that separates us, and take it from her. Her nails are perfect, polished blood-red talons against the pale, heavy cardstock. I can feel the weight of dozens of eyes on my back, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I open the envelope. Inside, a generic, store-bought card, the kind you buy in a multi-pack at a pharmacy. Thank you for joining us this year. The printed script reads, below it, in Vivian's flawless cursive, we appreciate your presence. Not love, not family, not even happy holidays. Presence, as if I were a rented chair, as if my attendance was a service rendered. The public humiliation is complete. It is a masterpiece of corporate malice, delivered with surgical precision. It is designed to remind me, and everyone else here, of my exact place. The orphan, the outsider, the charity case who is permitted to breathe the expensive air but must never, ever mistake it for her own. I fold the card slowly. I raise my eyes to hers. I conjure the mask of polite neutrality I've been building since I was 9 years old. Thank you, Vivian. It's lovely. Vivian smiles. A thin, satisfied smile. The kill is clean. She turns, about to signal the staff to clear the mountain of discarded wrapping paper, to move the party on to the imported desserts and vintage cognacs. The show is over. But it is not. Wait! The voice is not loud. It is a low, gravelly command that cuts through the polite murmuring like a diamond blade. My grandfather, Harold Hartman, is standing up. The room does not just quiet. It stops. Air particles freeze. Harold is a tall man, still lean and imposing in his 80s, and he commands silence simply by existing. He has the predatory stillness of a man who has built an empire and who has buried the men who tried to take it from him. Vivian's smile tightens, cracking at the edges. She hates, more than anything, when the script is changed without her approval. Harold, is everything all right? Harold ignores her. His gaze is fixed on the hall, where his chief of staff, a quiet man named Marcus, is standing. Bring it in, Marcus, Harold says. Marcus nods, once, disappears into Harold's private study, and returns a moment later. He carries a simple, polished wooden tray. On the tray sits a single, small box, no bigger than a teacup. It is covered in dark, wine-red velvet that looks ancient, soft, and profoundly expensive. I watch Vivian. This is what I do. I watch for the tells, the micro-expressions that betray the carefully constructed facade. And there it is. As Marcus walks the box into the center of the room, Vivian's shoulders stiffen. Her eyes lock onto the velvet, and for a fraction of a second, she stops breathing. It is not confusion. It is not surprise. It is recognition. And immediately following that recognition, a sudden, icy spike of pure panic. Her skin, usually flawless from $1,000 treatments, loses its color. She looks, for one heart-stopping second, like a fraudster who just heard the auditor's unannounced knock at the door. She recognizes a trace. She knows this box, and she is terrified of it. Harold takes the velvet box from the tray. The room is so quiet, I can hear the click of the ice settling in my untouched water glass. He walks past my father, who looks utterly bewildered. He walks past Vivian, whose hand has gone to the heavy pearls at her throat, her knuckles white. He walks past Trent, who looks annoyed, and Sabrina, who looks bored. He stops directly in front of me. The entire room, full of Colorado's most powerful people, is holding its collective breath. He places the velvet box in my hands. It is surprisingly heavy for its size, the nap of the velvet soft and cool against my skin. "Harold, really?" Vivian starts, her voice attempting a light, dismissive laugh. The laugh fractures in the middle, brittle and false. "You are spoiling her. It is hardly fair to the others. Besides," she adds, turning her gaze on me like a weapon, "girls should learn to be gentle, not greedy for expensive things." The words are meant to sting, to frame me as grasping, ungrateful, and unfeminine, but the barb is blunted by the sheer terror rolling off her in waves. She is desperate for me not to have this. I look down at the box. My pulse is not racing. It is doing what it does before a major discovery. It is slow, steady, and cold. My investigative instincts are screaming, "This is not a gift. This is evidence. This is a key. This is a code." The texture of the velvet, the precise weight of the object inside, it feels less like a present and more like a primed and loaded weapon. My grandfather leans down. The room strains to hear, but his words are for me alone. His voice is a low, dry rumble, smelling faintly of old whiskey and pine. "Do not open it now," he whispers, his piercing blue eyes fixed on mine. "Wait until the room is quiet. Wait until you are alone." He straightens up. He nods, once, as if sealing a contract. The atmosphere in the room is no longer just cold. It is pressurized. It is the sudden, vacuum-sealed silence that comes just before a catastrophic structural failure. Vivian is staring at the box in my hands as if it is a live grenade. Trent and Sabrina are staring at me with a new, unwelcome curiosity. My father just looks lost. This tiny, velvet-wrapped object has the power to detonate this entire family. And my grandfather, the man who built it all, just handed me the trigger. I fled the grand hall as the party fractured. The tension, stretched taut by my grandfather's actions, finally snapped. Vivian, a general whose battle plans had just been incinerated, was trying to regain control, her laugh too high, her gestures too sharp. As she attempted to steer the stunned guests toward the dessert buffet, Trent was glaring at me, his face flushed with anger, furious that the spotlight had been wrenched away from him. Sabrina, already bored, was scrolling through her phone. My father, Greg, just looked pale and lost, pointedly avoiding my gaze. I clutched the velvet box, its weight a solid, cold anchor in my unsteady hands. I gave a curt nod of thanks to my grandfather, murmured my excuses to the silent periphery, and retreated to the guest wing. My room in the Aspen estate is a sterile, Arctic white cube. It is furnished with exquisite, uncomfortable furniture and offers a billion-dollar view of the mountains. It is designed to be admired, not inhabited. It is not home. Home was a small brick house in Denver, a place that smelled of my mother's roses and cut grass. That home died when I was 9 years old. My mother, Elizabeth Hartman Duke, died too quickly, a sudden, voracious cancer that consumed her in 6 months. My father grieved for exactly 1 year. Then he brought Vivian Crestwood home. Vivian did not arrive as a stepmother. She arrived as a corporate raider executing a merger. She assessed the assets. My father was grieving, malleable, and desperate for someone to manage the messy details of his life. I was something else. I was the last living link to the Hartman bloodline, and therefore to the Hartman fortune. Vivian looked at me and did not see a daughter. She saw an unpolished asset, an investment that required careful management to mature. She did not raise me, she optimized me. Vivian's discipline was not about curfews, grounding, or chores. It was a relentless, psychological sculpting. She saw my intelligence not as a gift, but as a tool. "Isabel, dear," she would say, her hand resting coolly on my shoulder as I stressed over 8th grade calculus, her voice smooth as silk. "A B+ is the grade of the comfortably average. You are not average. You are a Hartman, and you will perform as such." Everything was geared toward maximizing my future return on investment. I was steered toward the debate club, not the theater group, economics, not art history. My perfect SAT score was not a cause for celebration. It was the expected outcome. My acceptance to Wharton was not a triumph. It was the satisfactory conclusion of her decade-long project. I was her money printer. I was meticulously built to go into high-stakes finance, to earn spectacularly, and, most importantly, to be the designated shock absorber for all family emergencies. The emergencies began almost the month I collected my first significant bonus. "Isabel, darling," she had called, her voice a symphony of casual distress. "Trent has a minor liquidity issue with his summer rental in the Hamptons. It is just a temporary shortfall. Could you possibly advance him a few thousand? He is so dreadfully embarrassed to ask." Advance was the preferred term. It was a brilliant, insidious piece of vocabulary. It implied a loan, a temporary measure that would, of course, be repaid. It was never repaid. A year later, "Sabrina needs specialized coaching for her equestrian trials. Your father and I are stretched so thin this quarter with the renovations, we just need a float until the end of the month." Those floats and advances were not requests. They were invoices. Over the years, they solidified from favors into duties. The language of crisis became normalized. To say no was not a simple financial boundary. It was a profound moral failing. To deny them was to be selfish, cold, and ungrateful. It was to prove I was, as Vivian often implied with a sad shake of her head, lacking the Hartman generosity. I was programmed to feel a deep, gnawing guilt for my own success, because my success was never truly mine. It was a resource for the collective, a collective managed exclusively by Vivian. I knew something was wrong long before I had the professional language for it. The rot was there, under the floorboards, and I could smell it. When I was 16, I was tasked with organizing my father's chaotic home office. He is a man of grand ideas and zero follow-through, a trait Vivian despises but exploits, buried under stacks of golf magazines. I found a stack of bank statements for one of his secondary accounts. I was already obsessive about numbers. Managing my own small savings with a teenager's fierce precision, I saw it immediately. A series of 3 identical withdrawals, spaced exactly 1 week apart. Each was for just under $10,000. They were coded as consulting fees. I brought the statement to my father. He looked at the line items, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "Consulting? I do not know. Ask Vivian, dear. She handles the bills." So I did. I found her in her dressing room, a sanctuary of mirrored surfaces and expensive perfumes. She was applying her lipstick, watching herself in the mirror. Not me. I held out the paper. "Vivian, what are these 3 withdrawals? They look like duplicates. Did the bank make a mistake?" She did not turn. She met my eyes in the reflection. Her own gaze was flat, bored. She glanced at the paper. "That? Oh, a simple bank error. They reversed it the next month. It is handled. Do not trouble your father with such boring details." I was 16, not stupid. I went back to the office and dug through the statements for the following month. There was no reversal. There was no corresponding deposit. When I tried to find the original statements again a week later, they were gone. The entire office had been professionally organized over the weekend. It was the first time I saw her lie, and the first time I realized how effortless it was for her. It was a bank error. I was just a silly, mistaken girl. The subject was closed. That feeling, that cold, sharp itch in my gut that tells me the numbers do not match the story, never left me. At Northline Quantitative, I weaponized it. I am the one they call when a high-frequency trading algorithm looks too perfect, or when a shell company in a tax haven jurisdiction has a board of directors composed of ghosts. I hunt for dirty money. I find discrepancies in the digital bedrock. My entire reputation is built on sniffing out the exact kind of sophisticated, high-society fraud that Vivian had dismissed as a bank error. I am very, very good at my job. And through all of it, my grandfather Harold watched. He sat in the eye of the storm. He never intervened. He never defended me during the annual Christmas humiliations. He never offered a kind word when Vivian dressed me down in public for choosing the wrong wine or wearing the wrong designer. He just observed, his sharp blue eyes missing nothing. His silence was its own kind of pressure cooker. I always felt I was being tested. He was waiting to see if I would shatter, or if I would finally, belatedly, learn to fight. Trent, of course, was simply Vivian's echo, her attack dog. He absorbed her disdain for me and reflected it back, amplified by his own arrogance. God, Izzy, he would sneer, watching me check a market feed on my laptop during a supposed vacation. You do not know how to live. It is just money. Relax. It is easy to relax when money is an abstract concept that simply materializes when you demand it. He mocked my discipline because he was utterly devoid of it. Sabrina was more dangerous. She was superficially sweet, all breathless compliments and feigned intimacy, but her affection was purely transactional. Isabel, you are so smart with numbers, she would coo, sliding up to me at the pool. I have this one credit card. I just do not understand the interest rates. They are so confusing. Could you maybe just fix the score for me? Fixing the score, without fail, meant me paying off a $3,000 balance she had run up on designer ski wear or festival tickets. About 2 years ago, after a particularly draining emergency, I changed. The request had come from Vivian. A frantic, late-night call. Trent was in trouble. He had over-leveraged a sure thing. He was facing ruin. The truth, which I dug up later, was that he owed massive gambling debts to a very unpleasant bookie. Vivian needed me to liquidate $20,000 of my own stock options. The emergency was real, but the pretext was a lie. The guilt was still there, a constant, dull ache in my chest, but something new was growing alongside it, a cold, methodical rage. I went home to my apartment in New York. I opened a new, encrypted file on a secure drive, and I started my own ledger. I began documenting everything. Every wire transfer, every advance. I cross-referenced the dates of their cash requests with their social media posts. Sabrina's emergency equestrian coaching fee corresponded precisely to the purchase of a new Chanel bag she posted on Instagram. Trent's liquidity issue matched a week-long party spree in Ibiza. I dug up old emails. I recorded the dates and times of the manipulative phone calls. I was building a case. Though I did not know who I was building it for, I was just gathering the data, because the data told the story. Still, I could not cut them off. The guilt was too deep, a hook buried in my spine. I was trapped in this toxic, cyclical ritual of service. Every time I built up the courage to finally say no, I am done, Vivian would deploy her nuclear option. She would call me, her voice trembling, not with rage, but with manufactured, heartbreaking fear. Isabel, it is your father. My blood would turn to ice. What is wrong? His heart. The doctors are so worried about his stress levels. These market fluctuations. He is beside himself. Trent's new venture is facing some headwinds, and if it fails, the shock. She would let the sentence hang in the air, unfinished, but devastatingly clear. The message was not subtext. It was a threat. Your brother's financial comfort is tied directly to your father's survival. If you do not pay, if you let Trent fail, the stress will kill your father. You will be responsible for his death. It was emotional blackmail of the highest, most evil order, and it worked, every single time. It was the leash she used to reel me back in, the chain that secured my silence and my compliance. I stand up from the Arctic white guest bed. I walk to the massive window, the snow outside glowing a sterile blue under the powerful security lights. The velvet box is still in my hand. Its weight feels enormous, impossibly heavy. As an American writer with a century of experience, my voice is rooted in the stark, emotional realism of the American experience, updated for the contemporary landscape. My style is direct, sensory, and unflinching, stripping away artifice to reveal the raw, often brutal, dynamics of family and wealth. Here is part 3 of the story, written in that voice. Midnight. The house was finally, mercifully, quiet. The only sound in the guest wing was the precise, expensive hum of the climate control system, pumping processed, sterile air into the room. I had waited for the sounds of the party to die, for the last slurred goodnights and the distant slam of car doors. I stood at the door to the library, a room my grandfather used as his real office, a place of dark wood, old leather, and secrets. I turned the heavy brass deadbolt. The thud of the lock settling into the frame was the only permission I needed. I sat at the massive oak desk, the same desk where Harold had built his empire. The wine-red velvet box sat in the precise center of the leather blotter. My hands were steady. This was not a gift to be unwrapped. It was a file to be processed. I lifted the lid. There was no jewelry, no deed. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded black satin, was a single, matte black USB drive. It was an encrypted, military-grade device, the kind I used at Northline for sensitive data transfers. Beside it lay a small, folded piece of heavy cream cardstock. I unfolded the note. It was my grandfather's handwriting. The script was sharp, angular, and impatient, the writing of a man who builds things and breaks things with equal precision. It contained only 2 lines. Compare Mount Vale Fund and Crestwood Holdings. Below that, 2 dates from the previous year, one in May, one in October. I stared at the words, Crestwood Holdings, Vivian's Company, Mount Vale Fund, the Hartman family's primary charitable trust, the one my grandfather had endowed, the one my father supposedly managed. I did not use my personal laptop. I used the library's dedicated air-gapped terminal, a machine that never touched the outside internet, a machine I knew was secure. I plugged in the USB. No password was required. The drive was keyed to this specific device. A single custom software application launched. It was not a file. It was a complete, mirrored ledger. My grandfather had not just given me a clue. He had given me the entire case file. The screen lit up with flowcharts, wire transfers, and signatory authorizations. My breath caught, not in a gasp, but in a sharp, cold intake of professional appreciation. This was a work of art. The evidence was immediate and damning. Vivian, using her own boutique advisory firm, Crestwood Holdings, had been systematically siphoning money from the Mount Vale Fund. The structure was elegant in its simplicity. Crestwood Holdings would submit inflated, often entirely fabricated, invoices for consulting, management fees, and risk assessment. And my father, Greg Duke, had signed off on every single one. But it was worse than that. The software highlighted the digital signatures. The signatures were my father's, legally binding and authenticated, but the IP address associated with the authorization, the digital location from which the approval was given, was not my father's office. It was an IP address hardwired to the security center right here in the Aspen mansion, an office only one person ever used, Vivian. She had not just forged his intent, she had weaponized his electronic identity. I clicked on the 2 dates from my grandfather's note. The May invoice was for $30,000, coded as Sabrina's Educational Trust Adjustment. I cross-referenced my own private ledger. That was the exact week Sabrina had called me, crying about her credit card debt. Vivian had used my emergency bailout of my sister as smoke. A small, visible fire to distract from the massive embezzlement happening right behind me. The October date was even larger, a $70,000 transfer. The day she had called me about Trent's failed investment, she was using my money to plug holes in the family's personal finances, while using the family trust to fund her own company. Then I saw the last folder. My name. Isabel Duke. I clicked it. My stomach hollowed out. There, on the screen, was a credit card application. A platinum-level, high-limit card. Opened 3 years ago. It was in my name, my social security number, my date of birth, but the address on the application was this one, the Aspen Estate. I had never seen this card. I had never signed for it. The statements were attached. The card was maxed out. Charges for spa treatments in Zurich, flights to Milan, deposits on custom furniture. The total amount siphoned, the sum of the fraudulent invoices and the identity theft, was precise. $540,000 over the last 3 years, all of it justified, buried in the trust's ledgers under the line item, Greg Duke Medical and Family Expenses. She was using my father's perceived ill health as a cover to steal from his own trust, while simultaneously using my identity to fund her lifestyle. I moved with cold precision. This was no longer a family matter. It was a fraud investigation. I photographed every screen with a digital camera. I exported the raw data back onto the encrypted drive. I ran an SHA-256 hash on the file bundle to create a unique, verifiable digital fingerprint, proving the data had not been altered. I uploaded the entire package, hash key included, to my private, secure cloud server, far from the Hartman network. I created a chain of evidence. As the upload finished, I noticed one last file I had missed. It was not a document. It was a video file. I clicked play. The screen filled with grainy, time-stamped footage from a hidden security camera. It was Vivian's study. Vivian herself was at her desk. Dressed in a sharp, gray suit, standing beside her was the family's private accountant, a nervous-looking man named Arthur. "Just sign the transfer, Arthur," Vivian's voice said, sharp and clear. "Greg has already approved the expenditure orally. This is just the paperwork." "But Mrs. Crestwood," the accountant stammered. "This payment to Crestwood Holdings. It is the 3rd this quarter, the trust charter." "The charter," Vivian interrupted, her voice dropping to a velvet-covered threat, "is my husband's concern, not yours. You are paid to process, not to opine. Sign it." The camera zoomed in as the man's trembling hand signed the document, authorizing another payment from Mount Vale to her pocket. I stopped the recording. This was not a clue. This was a conviction. My grandfather had not been passively observing. He had been building a case. He had installed the surveillance. He had mirrored the ledgers. He had set a bomb, packed it with irrefutable proof, and tonight, in that small velvet box, he had handed me the detonator. I ejected the drive and slid it into my pocket. The fear I had lived with for 20 years, the fear of not being good enough, the guilt of saying no, was gone. It had been replaced by something else, a cold, clean, purifying rage. The rage of an investigator who has just found the truth. The game was over. Vivian just did not know it yet. Midnight. The house was finally unnaturally still. The forced merriment had evaporated, leaving behind the residue of stale champagne and unspoken resentments. I waited until I heard the distant, muffled sounds of the staff finishing their cleanup, the clink of glasses, the closing of heavy doors. At 1:30, the only sound was the low electric hum of the estate's security system and the wind pressing against the triple-paned glass. I left my sterile guest room and walked barefoot down the corridor. The heated stone floors were cold. I went to the main library, my grandfather's true office. It was a fortress of dark walnut, old leather, and the faint, sweet smell of curing pipe tobacco and aging paper. It was a room built for silent, heavy decisions. I did not turn on the main lights. I used only the small, green-shaded banker's lamp on the massive desk. I walked to the towering door and turned the deadbolt. The thud of the lock settling into the frame was a gunshot in the silence. I was alone. I sat in Harold's oversized leather chair. The chair sighed under my weight. I placed the wine-red velvet box on the center of the desk blotter. For a long moment, I just looked at it. The soft velvet seemed to absorb the dim light. A small, dark void. My pulse was not racing. It was slow, steady, and cold. This was not a family drama anymore. This was an intake meeting. I lifted the lid. There was no jewelry, no heirloom. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded black satin, was a single, matte black USB drive. It was not a consumer-grade stick. It was an encrypted, military-grade device, the kind I used at Northline for transferring sensitive data. The kind that was built to resist interrogation. Beside it, a small, folded piece of heavy cream cardstock. I unfolded the note. The handwriting was unmistakable. Harold Hartman's script was angular, sharp, and utterly devoid of flourish. It was the writing of a man who signs 9-figure checks and termination letters with the same impatient energy. It was not a letter, it was a command. Compare Mount Vale Fund and Crestwood Holdings. Below that, 2 dates from the previous year, one in May, one in October. Crestwood Holdings, Vivian's boutique advisory firm, the one she'd supposedly built from scratch, her monument to her own financial genius. Mount Vale Fund, the Hartman family's primary charitable trust, the billion-dollar fund my grandfather had endowed to fund hospitals, universities, and cultural projects, the fund my father, Greg Duke, ostensibly managed as its chief trustee. My grandfather's whisper by the fireplace echoed in my head. This will make the truth reveal itself. I did not use my personal laptop. That was the first rule of digital forensics. Never use a network device. I turned to the machine sitting on the credenza behind the desk. It was the library's dedicated terminal, a powerful workstation that I knew, from my teenage attempts to bypass its security, was air-gapped. It did not touch the internet. It was a closed system. I slid the USB into the port. The screen flickered. I expected to see a simple file directory, a collection of PDFs or spreadsheets. Instead, a custom software application launched instantly. No password was required. The drive was keyed to this specific device. A complete, interactive financial schematic bloomed across the monitor. It was a spider's web of accounts, entities, and wire transfers. My grandfather had not just given me a clue. He had given me the entire case file, rendered in a visualization tool so sophisticated it had to be proprietary. The evidence was not buried. It was curated. I followed the largest artery of data, a thick red line originating from the Mount Vale Fund. It led directly to a holding company I did not recognize, which then split into 3 smaller veins, all terminating at one single entity, Crestwood Holdings. Vivian. She was not just stealing, she was laundering. She was using a shell company to invoice the Hartman Family Trust for consulting fees, management oversight, and risk assessment, then paying her own company with the proceeds. It was elegant, arrogant, and deeply criminal. I found the transaction logs. Every invoice was signed and approved. The digital signature was clear, legally binding. Greg Duke, my father. My stomach tightened, but my professional instincts took over. I traced the signature file. The authorization was his. Yes, the digital certificate was valid, but the metadata told the real story. I checked the originating IP address for the approvals. It was not my father's office in Denver. It was not his laptop. It was an IP address hardwired to the security and server room in this very mansion, an office that my father never used, an office that Vivian had converted into her personal command center. She had not forged his signature. She had piggybacked it. She had gotten his digital credentials, perhaps on a shared device, and was approving her own fraudulent invoices as him. I pulled up the 2 dates from Harold's note. The May transfer, a single payment of $30,000 from Mount Vale to Crestwood, coded as Sabrina's Educational Trust Adjustment. My blood went cold. I pulled out my phone, opened my own secret ledger. I checked the date in May. It was the exact week Vivian had called me, frantic, claiming Sabrina was in tears. that her summer program had a last-minute fee, and she would be devastated if she could not go. I had wired Sabrina $5,000 to cover it. It was a smokescreen, a sleight of hand. Vivian was using my forced, guilty payments as a distraction, a small, visible fire to pull focus while she committed grand larceny right behind me. I checked the October date, $70,000, the line item, Trenton Project Seed Capital. I checked my ledger again. That was the week Vivian had called me, her voice trembling, about my father's heart palpitations. She'd said the stress of Trent's failed investment was killing him. I had wired Trent $15,000 to keep him stable. It was the same pattern. She was orchestrating a multi-front attack, using small-scale emotional blackmail on me to cover the noise of her large-scale, automated theft from the family trust. Then I saw the last folder in the applications directory. It was labeled with my own name, Isabel Duke. I clicked it. My stomach hollowed out. It was a credit card application, a high-limit, platinum tier card, opened 3 years ago. It was in my name, my social security number, my date of birth, my signature, flawlessly forged. But the billing address was not my New York apartment. It was this address, the Aspen Estate. I had never seen this card. I had never known it existed. The software had pulled the complete, itemized statements, charges for spa treatments in Zurich, first-class flights to Milan, deposits on custom furniture, a recurring charge for a private wine storage facility. It was Vivian's entire lifestyle, lived on my credit, under my name. I ran the totals, the fraudulent invoices from Crestwood Holdings, combined with the maxed-out balance on the card she had opened in my name. $540,000. And the cover for it all? The overarching ledger item she had used to mask the drawdowns from the trust? Greg Duke Medical and Family Expenses. She was weaponizing my father's health as a justification for theft, the same way she weaponized it to bleed me dry, one emergency at a time. I did not feel panic. I did not feel tears. I felt a sudden, Arctic clarity. The vague, oppressive guilt I had carried my entire life evaporated, burned away by the clean, dry ice of pure data. This was my job. I was a risk investigator, and I had just found the rot. I moved with cold precision. This was no longer a family library. It was a war room. I photographed every single screen, every flowchart, every statement, every IP log. I exported the raw data from the custom application back onto the encrypted drive. I ran an SHA-256 hash on the entire file bundle, creating a unique, verifiable digital fingerprint. This, I would testify in court, was the data exactly as I had found it. No alterations. I connected my own secure drive, transferred the hashed bundle, and then, using a private, encrypted connection on my phone, uploaded the entire package to my remote server. Domiciled in a country that does not cooperate with American subpoenas, I built the chain of evidence. As the upload completed, I noticed one last file I had missed. It was not a document. It was a video file, labeled AH Interview. I double-clicked. The screen filled with grainy, time-stamped footage from a hidden security camera. It was not my grandfather. It was Arthur Hornby, the family's nervous private accountant. He was sitting in this very library, wringing his hands. My grandfather was off camera, his voice a low rumble. "Just tell me what you know, Arthur." "Mr. Hartman. She, Mrs. Crestwood. She has me on retainer. She said Mr. Duke approved it all orally, that the paperwork was just a formality." "Did you ever," Harold's voice cut in, "see Mr. Duke sign those authorizations?" "No, sir. She always handled the digital stamp herself. She said it was more efficient." The video cut. There was a second file. This one was from a camera in Vivian's study. Vivian herself, sharp and bright, at her desk. Arthur, the accountant, was standing before her, visibly trembling. "Just sign the transfer, Arthur," Vivian's voice said, sharp and clear. "Greg has already approved the expenditure orally. This is just the paperwork." "But Mrs. Crestwood," the accountant stammered. This payment to Crestwood Holdings. It is the third this quarter. The trust charter. The charter, Vivian interrupted, her voice dropping to a velvet-covered threat, is my husband's concern, not yours. You are paid to process, not to opine. Sign it. The camera zoomed in as the man's shaking hand signed the document, authorizing another $50,000 transfer from the Mount Vale Fund into her pocket. I stopped the recording. My grandfather's words came back to me. Wait until the room is quiet. This was not a gift. This was not a clue. This was a meticulously constructed, fully documented, pre-prosecuted case. Harold Hartman had not been ignoring the cancer in his family. He had been clinically observing it, culturing it, documenting its every move. He had built a bomb. He had packed it with irrefutable proof. And tonight, wrapped in velvet, he had finally handed me the detonator. The game was over. Vivian just had not realized the board was being cleared. I slept for exactly 4 hours. It was a deep, dreamless, chemical sleep. The kind that comes after a high-stakes problem is not just identified, but solved. I woke before the sun, showered, and dressed with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a procedure. I chose a simple, cream-colored cashmere sweater and gray flannel trousers. Neutral, calm. The clothes of a person who is not a threat, but a simple observer. At 9 a.m., I descended for the reconciliation brunch. The dining room was flooded with a blinding, painful light. Sunlight on snow is an unforgiving interrogator. Vivian, of course, had orchestrated it, a masterpiece of forced festivity, a towering centerpiece of white roses and silver holly, mimosas circulating on silver trays, the air thick with the smell of artisanal bacon and forced civility. She was trying to bury last night, to smother the strange, sharp tension of that velvet box under a mountain of expensive pastry. She greeted me with a theatrical kiss that landed an inch from my cheek. Isabel, darling, you look so refreshed. I do hope you slept well. Her voice was a bright, brittle candy shell. Perfectly. Vivian, thank you, I said. My voice even, polite. I met her eyes. Her smile did not falter, but the muscles around it tightened by a millimeter. She had been expecting sullenness, anger. My calm was an unwelcome variable. My father, Greg, was already at the table, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked exhausted, his eyes puffy and ringed with gray. He gave me a weak, watery smile. Morning, Izzy. He was a man trapped in a script he was too weak to rewrite. My grandfather, Harold, sat at the head of the long table, as still as the mountains outside the window. He was drinking black coffee, his gaze fixed on the snow-laden pines. He did not acknowledge me, but I felt his awareness. He was waiting. 0 hour. And there, seated to Vivian's right, was the final piece. Mr. Davies, the Hartman family advisor, a man with soft hands, a perpetually worried expression, and a portfolio of meticulously tailored suits. He was the architect of the trusts, the man who moved the numbers. He looked ashen, his mimosa untouched. Trent, naturally, was already on his second drink, his voice booming across the table. He was electric, high on his own perceived success from the night before. The Patek is just, it is a statement, you know? But the funding, that is the real game changer. The new EV prototype is going to blow the lid off the market. Vivian glowed, steering the spotlight back to her favored child. Trenton has been working so diligently. It is all about the capital flow, Trent continued, gesturing expansively with a piece of bacon. We just need to finalize the second-round draw from the Mount Vale Fund. Davies and I are meeting next week to streamline it. Sabrina, who had been documenting her plate of food for her Instagram story, piped up. Speaking of funds, Mommy, that skiwear brand, they want me in Kitzbühel for a shoot next month. They are just obsessed with me. I will need the advance from the Brand Development Fund before the first. Vivian nodded, a benevolent queen dispensing largesse. We will have Mr. Davies arrange it. Sweetie? It was perfect. They had laid the entire chessboard out for me. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I turned my gaze, not to Vivian, but to the advisor. I smiled, a polite, curious, professional smile, the smile I used at Northline just before I dismantled a fraudulent quarterly report. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the bright room. "I was just thinking about that, the Mount Vale Fund. It is such an important part of grandfather's legacy." Davies stiffened. He looked at me, blinking, a mouse surprised by a snake. "Ah, yes, Miss Duke, it is very significant." "I am sure it is," I continued, keeping my tone light, inquisitive. "With all these new ventures and brand contracts drawing from it, I am certain the transparency protocols are ironclad. The auditing must be rigorous, correct? To protect the charter?" The reaction was instantaneous. "Mr. Davies went pale, not just pale, but a waxy, greenish white. He opened his mouth, but only a small choking sound came out. He fumbled for his water glass, his eyes darting to Vivian, then to Harold, then back to his plate. He did not, would not, look at me. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Trent scowled, annoyed by the interruption to his monologue. Vivian's smile became a fixed, rigid line. Her eyes, moments before bright with social triumph, narrowed to cold, hard slits. Only Harold remained unchanged. He was still watching the snow fall outside, as if listening to a distant piece of music. Vivian knew this was an attack. She just did not know the caliber of the weapon. She moved to deflect, to discredit the source. She let out a small, condescending laugh. "Isabel, darling," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "Please, do not try to bring your work to the breakfast table. It is so aggressive. All those numbers and protocols. It is Christmas morning, not a hostile board meeting." She turned to the table, inviting them to share her amusement. "She is so much like her old boss at that terrible hedge fund, all sharp edges. It is just not very feminine. A girl should cultivate softness, not suspicion." It was her standard maneuver. Undermine my credibility by attacking my femininity. Paint me as a cold, grasping, unnatural woman, a bitter spinster who did not understand the gentle art of family. I let her words hang in the air. I let the silence settle, allowing everyone to absorb her assessment of me. I waited 1 beat, 2. Then, I reached into the pocket of my trousers. I pulled out a single, plain white business envelope. It was thin, unsealed. I placed it gently on the white linen tablecloth, next to my plate. It landed with almost no sound, but in the brittle silence of the room, it felt like a gunshot. The sound of Trent's fork clattering against his porcelain plate was deafening, sharp as a fire alarm. Sabrina actually looked up from her phone. My father stared at the envelope as if it were a scorpion. Inside were just 3 pages, 3 printouts from the file Harold had given me. I had selected them with care. The first, a statement for the platinum card Vivian had opened in my name, showing the Zurich spa charges. The second, a transfer authorization from Mount Vale to Crestwood Holdings, coded Greg Duke Medical, approved from Vivian's IP address. The third, a simple log of the October wire, directly adjacent to my own personal wire transfer to Trent. There were no names, no highlights, just the raw, anonymous data. To an outsider, it was meaningless. To Vivian, it was a death warrant. She was staring at the envelope. Her entire body had gone rigid. Her hand, which was raising her mimosa glass, was frozen halfway to her mouth. "Isabel," she said, her voice tight, strained, all the bright music gone. "What is this? More of your work?" "I am not sure," I said, my voice calm, neutral. "I was hoping you could tell me. It just seems like a simple misunderstanding." I looked at her, really looked at her. The mask was gone. The radiant hostess, the benevolent queen, the matriarch, all evaporated. The woman staring back at me was a cornered animal, Her smile was a ghastly, stretched rictus, a desperate, muscular effort that did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were terrified. She gripped the stem of her glass so tightly I thought it would snap. "You," she whispered, her voice shaking with a rage she could barely contain, "are misunderstanding. Isabel, you are deeply and dangerously mistaken." "Am I?" I asked, just as quietly. My grandfather turned his head, his gaze slowly moving from the snow-covered pines to the center of the table. He looked at the envelope. He looked at Vivian's terrified, furious face. He looked at me. He did not smile. He simply nodded. Once, a tiny, almost imperceptible motion. The hour had arrived. I left the table. I did not run. I did not make a sound. I placed my linen napkin neatly on the table beside my untouched plate, pushed back my chair, and stood. The pressurized silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum, and every eye was on me. Vivian's face was a mask of stretched, reptilian fury. Trent looked bewildered. My father looked like he was about to be physically ill. My grandfather was still watching me, his expression unreadable. I walked out of the dining room. I did not look back. I walked past the grand staircase, through the cavernous hall, and pushed open the heavy oak doors to the main terrace. The mountain air hit me like a physical blow. It was 5 degrees, sharp, and clean. It burned my lungs and cleared my head. I walked to the stone balustrade, my hands gripping the frozen rock. I needed the cold. It focused me. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady, gliding over the encrypted screen. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice. Anya Delgado. Anya, senior partner at Westridge and Lowell. She is the attorney corporations hire when they are facing annihilation. She is the one I have used for forensic accounting consultations at Northline. She is sharp, she is expensive, and she does not lose. Anya, it is Isabel Duke. Isabel, her voice was crisp, cutting through the thin mountain air. This is not your usual secure line. Are you safe? I am secure. I am on a private terrace. I am sending you a file package. Now, encrypted. The hash key is in a separate text message. You will recognize the protocol. What am I looking at? Embezzlement, conspiracy to defraud, and aggravated identity theft. The target is the Hartman Family Trust, Mount Vale. The perpetrator is my stepmother, Vivian Crestwood. I gave her the entire summary in less than 60 seconds. The shell company, the spoofed digital signatures, the fraudulent invoices, the credit card in my name, the video of the accountant. The total, $540,000. There was a silence on the line, but it was not an empty one. I could hear the rapid, precise click of her keyboard. I have the package, she said. The hash matches. I am opening the files. My God, Isabel, this is not an accusation. This is a conviction. The IP logs tracing her signature authorizations to her private office. The time-stamped video of her coercing the accountant. This is 95% of a federal case, gift-wrapped. I need the last 5%, I said. I agree, Anya replied instantly. The data proves what happened, but her defense will be narrative. She will claim she was protecting a frail, incompetent husband. She will say Greg knew and approved it all, that this was just creative family accounting to protect the assets from his bad decisions. She will paint you as the ungrateful, vengeful daughter, tearing the family apart over a simple misunderstanding. It is the exact play she has been running on me for 20 years, I said, my voice flat. Then we need her to admit the structure, Anya said. We need her, in her own words, to confirm she acted alone. We need her to state her intent. We need her arrogance. Isabel, can you get it? She is terrified right now, I said, looking back through the glass wall. Vivian was standing, gesturing wildly at my father, her face crimson. But her arrogance is stronger than her fear. She thinks I'm stupid. I can get it. Good. Colorado is a one-party consent state. As long as you are a participant in the conversation, you can record it without her knowledge. Your smartwatch? It has the capability. Then do it. Get her boasting. Get her to explain the structure. I want her to admit she controls Greg's signature. I want her to admit she handled the advisor. Then call me back." Anya hung up. I took one more deep, burning breath of the freezing air. I turned and walked back inside. The brunch was over. The staff, moving with silent, fearful efficiency, were clearing the dishes. My father and siblings had scattered. Vivian was in the grand hall, standing before the massive fireplace, her back to me. She was gripping her phone, pacing. She sensed me and spun around. Her face was a battleground of panic and fury. She had been caught, and she was furious at me for catching her. She immediately went on the offensive. "Isabel, there you are. You have no idea the damage you have just caused. Your father is extremely distressed. His heart, after all this excitement." It was her go-to weapon, my father's heart, my cue to feel guilt, to apologize, to retreat. I did not. Instead, I walked toward her, my own face a mask of calculated, daughterly concern. "That is exactly why I came to find you. Vivian," I said, my voice pitched with the perfect tremor of anxiety. "The things I saw in that file, I am worried. I am worried about Dad." Her expression flickered. This was not the attack she expected. She was braced for a fight, not for an ally. "Worried?" she asked, her voice suspicious. "What are you talking about?" "Let's go to the library," I said, gesturing to the room where I had uncovered everything, "where we can speak privately." She narrowed her eyes, then nodded. She thought she was walking in to manage me, to put me back in my box. She was walking into a deposition. I closed the heavy library doors behind us. The room was dim, smelling of old leather and Harold's authority. I did not sit. I leaned against the desk, feigning exhaustion and fear. "Vivian, those signatures," I started. "Those transfers from Mount Vale. Dad's digital signature is on every single one. If the IRS, if the rest of the board, ever audited the trust, all those payments to Crestwood Holdings, they would say he did it. Vivian, he could go to jail." I had offered her the exact defense Anya predicted. I had given her the scapegoat, my father. Vivian studied me, her sharp mind recalibrating. She saw an opening. She saw the stupid, emotional Isabel she had always known. She saw a way to regain control. A small, patronizing smile touched her lips. "Oh, Isabel, you are so smart with your little spreadsheets, but you understand nothing about how real power works. Of course your father's signature is on it." I looked at her, widening my eyes in confusion. "But he would never—" "Of course he would not," she scoffed. She walked to the small bar cart and poured a heavy measure of brandy into a snifter. Her hand was steady now. "Your father is a weak man, a kind man, but weak. He has no head for this. He was running the trust into the ground with his sentimental projects." I discreetly tapped the face of my smartwatch. The recording app activated, the small red icon glowing for half a second before fading. The audio was streaming live, via my phone's hotspot, directly to Anya's secure cloud server. "So you stepped in?" I asked, feeding her the line. "To help him?" "I saved him," she snapped, her arrogance surging. "I saved this family. I established a proper, dual authorization structure. It is perfectly standard for high net worth management. His digital signature, which I control, provides the legal authorization, and my verbal authorization, based on my intimate understanding of Harold's true wishes, directs the capital. Bingo. His digital signature, which you control," I repeated, letting the question hang. "Of course, Greg gave me all his passwords years ago. He cannot even remember his own birthday. Someone has to be the adult in the room." "But Crestwood Holdings, that is your company. Vivian, you are paying yourself, from the trust." She laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "It is a reallocation of assets. Isabel, you, in finance, should know that term. The money is not being spent. It is being parked. Do you have any idea the kind of capital Trent's IPO is going to generate? When that company goes public, All of this money, she waved her hand, will be returned to the trust, tenfold. It is a simple bridge loan. I am protecting this family's future from your father's incompetence. There it was. The motive, the structure, the admission of self-dealing. What about Mr. Davies? I asked, playing my last card. The family advisor? He just lets this happen? Vivian smiled, a truly vicious, self-satisfied smile as she sipped her brandy. She was back in control. I was just the silly girl again. Arthur Davies? Arthur is a bean counter. I upped his advisory fee by 20% last year. He understands. The new structure. He has been properly UNDRSTOOD, let's say. He knows where his paycheck is signed. And the credit card? I whispered, as if in awe. In my name? She shrugged, a gesture of profound indifference. A simple necessity. Your father's personal credit is a disaster. I needed a clean line for operating expenses. Travel. Things this family requires. Your credit is excellent. You should be flattered. It was all going to be handled. All of it. She put the brandy glass down on the desk with a sharp click. The lecture was over. Now, I am glad we have had this talk. I trust this investigation of yours is finished. You will return that ridiculous USB to your grandfather, and we will never speak of this again. It is, as you said, for your father's own good. I nodded slowly, my face a mask of dawning comprehension. I understand. Vivian, I understand perfectly. Thank you for clarifying. I turned and walked out of the library, leaving her alone with her brandy, secure in her victory. I went back to the terrace. The cold felt good. I pulled out my phone. Did you get it? The audio is crystal clear. Anya's voice was electric. She just handed us her own head, his digital signature, which I control. Davies has been properly understood. It is a bridge loan. She confessed to every single element. We have her. We have her on breach of fiduciary duty, conspiracy to defraud, and racketeering. It is a clean kill. So what is next? Do we call the police? No, Anya said. Police are messy. They leak. We use the law. Isabel, the rules of the powerful. Hold on. I heard her speaking to an associate. Pull the full amended charter for the Mount Vale Fund. Cross-reference Hartman versus Cole, Colorado, 2008. Yes, that one. Look for any private addenda filed post-litigation. Anya came back on the line. Okay, your grandfather is a very, very smart man. After an old lawsuit with a partner, it seems Harold filed a secret addendum to the trust charter, a conduct and integrity clause. What does it do? It is a poison pill. Isabel, it states that if any trustee or their designated agent with signatory power, that is Vivian, is found to be engaging in willful self-dealing or gross mismanagement, their authority is immediately and automatically void. It triggers an independent audit and grants a designated successor monitor full and immediate control of the trust and all its assets. My heart hammered against my ribs. And who, I asked, is the successor monitor? You are, Anya said. He named you as the sole monitor 2 years ago, the USB. He was not just giving you evidence, Isabel, he was giving you the keys. I looked through the window at my grandfather, who was now sitting alone in the hall, reading a newspaper as if nothing had happened. He waited, I whispered. He waited until I was strong enough to use them. The clause is actionable, right now, Anya said. We can file for an emergency injunction with the court and have her assets frozen by sundown, but that is public. It is war. What is the alternative? The alternative, Anya said, is how this is really done. We do not fire the missile. We just open the silo doors. We show them the gun, the confession, and the signature on the poison pill. We send a demand letter. We give them one chance, and one chance only, to surrender unconditionally. Do it, I said. This is the moment, Isabel. Anya's voice was serious. The moment you hit send, the family you knew is gone forever. The family I knew was a lie. I said. Send the letter. No, Anya said. Not me. You. It has to come from you. I will draft the legal framework and the citations. You write the email, attach the recording, attach the addendum. Give them 48 hours. I went to my sterile guest room. I sat at the pristine white desk. I opened a new, encrypted email draft. I addressed it to Vivian. I copied my father, Greg Duke. I copied Trent. And I copied Mr. Arthur Davies. The subject line was simple. Mount Vale Fund. Demand for immediate rectification. I attached the audio file. Vivian Confession 1225 MP3. I attached the scanned trust addendum. Successor Monitor Clause, PDF. I attached the master spreadsheet. Fraud Ledger, XLSX. The body of the email was 500 words of cold, legal precision. It outlined the evidence. It cited the specific breaches of fiduciary duty. It cited the addendum. And then, it listed the non-negotiable terms. 1. Immediate and full resignation of Vivian Crestwood and Greg Duke from all trustee and signatory positions. 2. Full repayment of all misappropriated funds, $540,000, to be wired to the trust within 24 hours. 3. A signed, written confession from Vivian, detailing the fraud, to be held in escrow by Westridge and Lowell. 4. Immediate cessation of all pending capital draws for Trent's startup. I gave them a deadline, 48 hours. If the terms were not met by noon on December 27th, the entire evidence package, including the audio confession, would be forwarded to the Colorado Attorney General, the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and the board of the Mount Vale Fund. For my entire life, I had been the one begging, pleading for fairness, writing checks to buy my father's health, accepting humiliation as my due. I stared at the screen. The power had finally, irreversibly, shifted. The begging was over. I was dictating the terms now. I hit send, and in the corner of my laptop screen, I started a simple digital countdown clock. 47 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. The email was a detonator. I did not have to wait long for the first shockwave. The countdown clock on my laptop showed 47 hours and 31 minutes remaining when my phone, which had been silent, buzzed with an incoming call. It was my father. I let it ring 3 times. I needed to control the pace. I needed him to be the one desperate to talk. I answered on the 4th ring. Isabel? His voice was not the weak, jovial, avoidant tone I was used to. It was a low, wrecked whisper. It was the sound of a man who had finally hit the bottom. Hello. Dad? My voice was calm, neutral, not cold, but not warm. The voice of an investigator. Izzy, can we talk? Privately? Please, not in the house. I am walking down the main drive, by the gates. I will be there in 2 minutes, I said, and hung up. I put on my coat and boots. The opulent, pressurized warmth of the mansion felt suffocating. When I stepped outside, the sharp, 0-degree air was a relief. I walked down the long, heated driveway, past the fleet of pristine black Suburbans the family kept for guests. I saw him standing near the massive, wrought-iron gates, a small, hunched figure against the towering snowbanks. He was not wearing a proper coat, just a cashmere cardigan, and he was shivering, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He looked old. He looked exactly like the weak man Vivian had described. Dad. He turned, and his eyes were red-rimmed. He had been crying. Izzy, I saw the email, the audio, the credit card. Yes, I said. I did not know, he said, the words tumbling out. About the card in your name, I swear to God, I did not know she would do that. That is monstrous. I said nothing. I just waited. The silence and the cold were my allies. But the other things, he stammered, his gaze dropping to the snow at his feet. The signatures, the trust. You signed them, I stated. It was not a question. He took a ragged breath. She would bring me things, stacks of papers, Just sign here. Greg, it is for the taxes. Just sign here. It is for the quarterly filings. It was always a rush. I was always late for golf, or a meeting. So I signed. You signed blank authorizations, did not you? I asked. He flinched, as if I had struck him. He nodded, a tiny, miserable gesture. Sometimes, she said it was more efficient, that she would fill in the details later, to save me the trouble. You gave her your digital credentials, your passwords. She helps me with everything. I cannot remember them all. You let her do it, I said, my voice cutting through his excuses. You gave her the gun. You looked the other way because it was easy, because you were afraid of her. Yes, he burst out, his face crumpling. Yes, I am. You do not know what she is like. Izzy, when the doors are closed, she reminds me, every day, that I am nothing, that I married up, that your mother's family, your grandfather, just tolerates me. She said if I ever questioned her, if I ever made a fuss, she would expose things, old mistakes. She would ruin my reputation. She would tell Harold. I was just so afraid of losing what I had, of losing the dignity. The dignity. The word was so pathetic, so hollow. It almost made me laugh. He had traded his daughter, his integrity, and his wife's legacy for the appearance of dignity, for the cars, the house, the title. She used your dignity as a shield, I said. She used your health as a weapon against me. She used your signature to steal. She has to be stopped, Dad, and you have to help me stop her. How? He whispered. She will destroy me. She will destroy all of us if you do not, I said. The email I sent, that is a legal demand. If she does not comply, I am going to the Attorney General, and when they investigate, they will see your signature on every fraudulent document. They will see your name on the trust. She will walk away and say she was acting on your orders. You will be the one who goes to prison. The blood drained from his face. He had not connected those dots. He had only been afraid of Vivian. He had not considered the state of Colorado. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice shaking. I need the truth, I said. In writing, I need your sworn testimony that you gave her access to your credentials, and that you knowingly signed blank authorization forms under her direction, without knowledge of their specific purpose. A statement? He said, horrified. That is a confession. It is your only defense, I replied. It is the only thing that separates you from being her co-conspirator. You are a victim, Dad, but you need to start acting like one. I need proof. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face, perhaps for the daughter he used to know, the one who would have cried, who would have folded, who would have saved him. She was gone. I think I have something, he mumbled, pulling out his phone with trembling fingers. I was in my study last month. She came in. She was in a hurry. She needed a signature for Trent. Something about the startup. She was on the phone. She just threw a paper at me. He scrolled through his photos. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. I took a picture of it. After, I do not know why, it just felt wrong. He turned the screen to me. And there it was, the golden ticket. It was one of the trust's official wire authorization forms. The amount was blank, the payee was blank, the date was blank, and at the bottom, in his clear, familiar handwriting, was his signature. Greg Duke. Send that to me, I said, my voice sharp. Now, secure text. He fumbled with the controls and sent the file. My phone vibrated. I had it. Irrefutable proof of his confession. The final nail in Vivian's legal coffin. I need your written statement by noon tomorrow, Dad, or you are on her side of the email, with her, Trent, and Davies. You will not be copied. You will be a primary defendant. He just nodded, tears rolling freely down his cheeks. Okay, Izzy, okay. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I turned and walked back to the house. leaving him alone by the gate. I did not feel pity. I did not feel triumph. I felt the cold, clean click of a puzzle piece locking into place. The second crack came just 2 hours later. A text from a number I did not recognize, but the message was unmistakable. Isabel, it is Sabrina. Can we talk? Not in the house. I am at the stables. I sighed. The emotional marathon was not over. I walked the quarter-mile through the snow to the heated, multi-million-dollar stables, a ridiculous monument to horses that were worth more than most homes. She was sitting on a hay bale, dressed in a perfectly distressed $1,000 ski jacket. She, too, had been crying, but her tears were different. They were the frustrated, frightened tears of a child who just had her allowance taken away. Isabel, she sniffled. Mom is going crazy. She is screaming. She said you are trying to ruin us. She said you are taking all the money. I am not taking any money. Sabrina, I am stopping Vivian from stealing money. But that word is so ugly. She is not. She would not. She opened a credit card in my name and spent tens of thousands of dollars on it, I said flatly. That is a crime. Sabrina's head snapped up, and for the first time, I saw genuine shock on her face. Not moral outrage, but a kind of personal betrayal. The credit card? Oh my God. She told me about that. I froze. She told you? Yes, she said, her voice rising. Last spring, when I had that issue with the Neiman Marcus card, Mom sorted it out. She said she was juggling assets, and she had opened a new temporary line of credit for me, but that it was under your name for tax purposes. She said she would pay it all off after Trent's IPO. She said you knew. She said it was just a family arrangement. The audacity of it, the layered, toxic deceit. She had not just used my identity. She had used my identity as a tool to placate my sister, painting me as a willing participant in the fraud. She lied. Sabrina, I never knew. It is identity theft, and the money she used to sort out your card, it came from me, just like the money for your ski trips, and your car, and your modeling contract. It all came from me, or it was stolen from the trust. None of it was real. The reality hit her. Her tears were no longer about the money, they were about the lie. So, the Kitzbühel trip is not happening, I said. The accounts are being frozen. The brand development fund does not exist. It was a line item Vivian used to steal from the trust. She stared at me, her world collapsing. What is going to happen? Vivian is going to repay every cent, I said. Or she is going to prison. And me? And Trent? That depends on what you do next, I said. I was not going to offer her comfort. You can be a witness, or you can be a beneficiary of stolen funds. Your choice. She started to cry again, but this time it was a low, frightened wail. I left her there, next to a horse that was probably worth more than the entire sum. Trent did not seek me out. I found him in the billiard room, angrily slamming balls around the table, a glass of whiskey on the railing at 10 in the morning. So, he sneered as I walked in. He did not look up. The little accountant strikes back. You think you are a hero. Is he? Tearing your own family apart on Christmas? I did not do this. Trent, Vivian did, and you benefited. Benefited? He laughed, a harsh barking sound. It is called capital restructuring. It is what smart families do. You move money around to maximize opportunity. That is it. You, with your little 9-to-5 spreadsheet job, you would not understand. This is how the real world works. My startup is going to be worth $10 billion. This stolen money, as you call it, is a rounding error. It is an investment. It is a felony. Trent, it was stolen using our father's name and my identity. Oh, grow up, he spat, finally looking at me. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with a lazy, entitled rage. Dad is an idiot. You are a martyr. Mom is the only one in this house with any guts. She did what needed to be done. And you? You are just jealous. You have always been jealous. You were never a real Hartman. You are just here. There it was, the core truth of his entire being. I was not family. I was a resource to be tapped and despised. The demand letter is final, I said, my voice as cold as the air on the terrace. Your second-round funding is canceled, effective immediately, and Anya Delgado, my lawyer, will be contacting you regarding the clawback of the initial seed money, which has now been classified as the proceeds of a criminal enterprise. The color drained from his face. You cannot do that. The investors are about to find out their primary partner fund is being investigated for fraud, I said. You should call your own lawyer, Trent. I turned to leave. Just as I reached the door, my phone buzzed. It was a text message. From Harold. It was 4 words. Finish it, legally, no pity. I closed the door on Trent's stunned, furious face. My spine felt like steel. The counterattack from Vivian's side was both pathetic and predictable. First, the house staff suddenly burst into a flurry of panicked activity. Mrs. Crestwood, the head housekeeper announced to the room at large, has had a terrible spell, a dizzy spell. She is resting. The doctor has been called. It was a performance for an audience of none. My grandfather was in the library. My father was locked in his room, probably drinking. Trent and Sabrina had vanished. I was in the guest wing, on my laptop. I initiated my own protocols. I did not need to wait 48 hours for this. I logged into my bank accounts. I placed holds on all automatic transfers. I locked my credit. Then I made the call. I spent 3 hours on a recorded line with the fraud department of the bank that had issued the card in my name. I filed a formal, notarized report of aggravated identity theft. I named Vivian Crestwood as the sole perpetrator. I sent them the digital copy of the application. I sent them the statements. I informed them that this was part of an active, larger criminal investigation. The bank, seeing the scale of the fraud and the name Hartman, did not hesitate. They froze the account, flagged Vivian's social security number, and opened their own internal investigation. At the same time, Anya called me. The advisor is scrambling, she said. Our IT guy has been monitoring the estate's network traffic. Someone with Arthur Davies's credentials has been attempting, and failing, to access the server logs for the past hour. He is trying to delete the IP logs that tie Vivian to your father's signature. He cannot, I said, looking at the encrypted file on my desktop. I have the primary mirror. Harold's software must have locked him out of the original. He is just making it worse, Anya said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. The attempted deletion is, in itself, an act of conspiring to destroy evidence. He just made himself an accessory after the fact. He is done. The great, glittering, indestructible mansion felt different. It was no longer a fortress of power. It was a stage set, crumbling under the weight of the truths it was built to hide. The walls, once so imposing, now felt thin. The air, once so rarefied, felt toxic. Every lie they told, every confession they offered, every panicked move they made, only confirmed what I already knew. The velvet box had not just contained the truth, it had contained my freedom, and with every new piece of evidence, every crack in their polished facade, I was becoming more, not less, resolved. I was not the victim, I was the investigator, and the case was nearly closed. The ultimatum was a digital grenade. I had pulled the pin and rolled it into the center of their lives. The 48-hour clock on my laptop was not just a timer, it was a heartbeat, thudding away in the silence of the Aspen estate. The first explosion was not a surrender. It was a counter-assault. My phone rang at 6 p.m. Anya. The first move is in, she said, her voice sharp and devoid of pleasantries. We just received a cease and desist, not from the family advisor, from a crisis PR firm in Washington, D.C., a heavy hitter. A PR firm? I asked, pacing the sterile white carpet of my room. Vivian is not treating this as a legal threat. Isabel, she is treating it as a media war. The letter is a masterpiece of defamation. It paints you as a deeply troubled woman. emotionally unstable after years of professional burnout. It alleges you have a long-standing and pathological resentment of your stepmother. She is not refuting the evidence. She is assassinating the witness. She is preparing to leak this narrative to the Pitkin County Society pages. She is threatening to call me crazy, I said, my voice flat. She already has. We are responding. How? With facts, Anya snapped. I have already compiled and sent our rebuttal. I attached your last 3 annual performance reviews from Northline Quantitative. I attached the internal memo announcing your promotion to Senior Risk Investigator. I attached the letter from your division head, the one congratulating you on identifying the $7 million algorithmic anomaly, the one that specifically praised your unflinching analytical rigor and profound mental acuity. I asked them, via certified mail, how they plan to reconcile their client's claim of emotional instability with a professional record that just earned my client a 7-figure bonus. The narrative is dead. Isabel. She just wasted a $100,000 retainer. The laptop chimed. A new notification. It was a group text, a new thread created by Trent. The title? Duke Family Emergency. It included me, Dad, and Sabrina. Trent's message was desperate, a long block of text reeking of panic and privilege. This is insane. We are a family. We do not sue family. Izzy, you have no idea what you are doing. You are tearing us apart over a misunderstanding. Mom is sick. She is in bed. She is devastated. You are stressing Dad out. This is not how we do things. We can fix this. Just us. Call off your lawyer. Let's talk. Just the 4 of us. Family first. Always. I stared at the message. Family first. The phrase was so obscene, so utterly hollow. It made me nauseous. I watched the screen. 1 minute, 5, 10. No one replied. Not me, not my father, not even Sabrina. The Duke family emergency chat was dead on arrival. Trent's appeal to a family that had only ever been a one-way extraction system floated in the digital void. Unanswered. The next message, 30 minutes later, was a direct one, a voice note, from Sabrina. I pressed play. Her voice was a small, terrified whisper, the sound compressed and tinny. Isabel, I am at the airport. I am going back to New York. I cannot be here. Mom is going crazy. She tried to make me sign a paper, a statement, saying that you were always jealous of her, that you were unstable, that you stole things from her when you were a teenager. It was all lies. Her voice broke in a raw, choked sob. I am scared, Isabel, but she lied to me. She told me you knew about that credit card. She said it was an arrangement to help me build my credit. She lied. She used you, and she lied to me. There was a long pause, just the sound of an airport boarding announcement, muffled and distant. I will not sign her paper, she whispered. If you need me to, I will sign a statement for you. I will be a witness. I will tell them what she said. Just please, fix this. I am so sorry. The message ended. I saved the audio file. I forwarded it to Anya. File. Witness S. Duke, MP3. I had my first witness. The second one arrived at 8 p.m. An email from my father. The subject line, my sworn statement. It was not an emotional plea. It was not an excuse. It was a 3-page, notarized PDF. His signature was at the bottom, shaky but legible. I read the text. It was a full and total capitulation. I, Greg Duke, being of sound mind, do hereby attest that I provided my wife, Vivian Crestwood, with full access to my digital credentials and signatures. I attest that on multiple occasions, I knowingly signed blank financial authorization forms for the Mount Vale Fund under her direction. She assured me they were for routine expenditures. I was manipulated. I feared the personal and financial repercussions she threatened, and I abdicated my fiduciary duty out of cowardice and a desire to avoid conflict. It was everything. It was the blank authorization photo, now a sworn affidavit. He had chosen. He was not a co-conspirator. He was her first victim. I forwarded the PDF to Anya. File, Exhibit G, Duke, Affidavit, PDF. The 48-hour clock was suddenly irrelevant. The pieces were moving faster. At 8:30 p.m., my laptop chimed with a new final calendar invitation. It was not from a family member. It was from the office of Harold Hartman. Subject, Emergency Meeting, Mount Vale Fund Trust Board. Location, the Aspen Lodge, Executive Boardroom. Time, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Attendees, Harold Hartman, Isabel Duke, Greg Duke, Vivian Crestwood, Trent Duke, Arthur Davies, Anya Delgado, representing I, Duke, and the two other independent, non-family board members of the trust. My ultimatum had been a threat of war. My grandfather was convening the peace treaty, or more likely, the formal surrender. He had superseded my deadline. He was ending this, not in 48 hours, but in 13. The shareholder meeting was no longer a metaphor. I spent the next several hours in my room, on a secure video call with Anya, reviewing the strategy for the morning. We had the evidence. We had the confession. We had the witnesses. At 2 a.m., I hung up. The house was silent, a cold, dead silence. I went to the library to get a glass of water. She was there. Vivian. She was standing by the empty fireplace, illuminated only by the blue-white security lights from the lawn. She was not the sick, distressed woman from Trent's text. Her hair was down, tangled. She was wearing an expensive silk robe. Her face was pale, her eyes red, not from tears, but from a rage so pure it was almost electric. "You," she hissed. The word was venom. I stopped, the water pitcher in my hand. "You think you are so clever," she whispered, taking a step toward me. "With your little audio files, your father's pathetic, sniveling letter, you think you have won." "This is not a game, Vivian." "It is all a game," she spat, her voice shaking. "And you are too stupid to see the board. You are going to that meeting tomorrow, and you are going to stand up, and you are going to tell them you made a mistake. You are going to say you were stressed. You are going to retract that insane, libelous email, or I will destroy you. You have nothing left. Vivian, I have the truth." "I do not need the truth," she laughed, a high, sharp, terrible sound. "I will make one. I will fabricate a paper trail that buries you. I will tell them you were a corporate spy, sent by Northline to infiltrate this family and steal our assets. I will have you disbarred from the financial industry. I will leak stories that you are a drug addict. I will tell them your grandfather is senile and you are manipulating him. You will not just be poor, you will be toxic. You will have nothing. You will lose everything." I looked at her. I saw the desperate, flapping, ugly panic, the final, hollow threat of a queen who had already been checkmated. I set the picture down on the desk. "I've been losing my entire life. Vivian," I said, my voice quiet, cold. "I lost my mother. I lost my father to you. I lost more than $500,000, paying for a family that despised me. What, exactly, is left to lose?" I stood up straight, meeting her hateful gaze. "I've already lost enough." I walked past her. She did not move. She just stood there, a ghost in a silk robe, vibrating with her own useless hatred. I went back to my room. I locked the door. I looked at the countdown clock I had set. 7 hours remaining. The meeting was at 9 a.m. The clock would run out just as we sat down at the table. The Aspen Lodge Executive Boardroom was a tomb of polished walnut and brushed steel, designed to make billion-dollar decisions feel inevitable. One entire wall was a sheet of plate glass, looking out onto a silent, heavy forest of snow-covered pines. The air was cold, still, and smelled faintly of floor wax and old money. It was exactly 9 a.m. We were arranged like opposing armies. On one side of the massive, reflective table sat Vivian, Trent, and the family advisor, Arthur Davies. They had their own lawyer, a man I did not recognize, who looked expensive, reptilian, and deeply uncomfortable. On our side, me, Anya Delgado, and my father, Greg, my grandfather, Harold Hartman, sat alone at the head of the table, a silent, granite patriarch. At the far end were the two independent board members, a retired judge named Muller, and a stern-looking woman from a Denver financial firm, Ms. Cho. They looked confused, angry, and cold. Vivian was a masterpiece of controlled fury. She was dressed in a severe charcoal gray suit, her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin over her cheekbones. She looked immaculate, brittle, and murderous. Trent was pale, fidgeting with his cuffs, his usual arrogance replaced by a sullen, childish terror. My father just stared at the wood grain of the table, his face gray. Anya rose. She did not wait for an introduction. She wore a simple, dark blue suit, and she commanded the room not with volume, but with a sudden, absolute vacuum of frivolous noise. "Thank you all for attending this emergency session," she began, her voice crisp and clinical. "We are here to address a series of gross and willful violations of the Mount Vale Fund's charter. These violations, orchestrated by Mrs. Vivian Crestwood, with the participation of Mr. Trent Duke and the negligent complicity of Mr. Arthur Davies, constitute a conspiracy to defraud the trust of more than $500,000. Vivian's lawyer started to rise. "These are outrageous, unsubstantiated allegations." "They are substantiated," Anya said, not even looking at him. "I am now distributing the evidence package, which has already been certified by a third-party forensic auditor." Anya's associate, a young man I had not seen before, moved silently around the table, placing a thick, spiral-bound report in front of each board member. "If you will turn to Exhibit A," Anya said, "you will see the timeline. It details 34 separate wire transfers from the Mount Vale Fund to a shell entity, Crestwood Holdings, which is wholly owned by Mrs. Crestwood. You will note these transfers are coded as consulting fees and Greg Duke medical expenses." Ms. Cho, the financial expert, gasped, her head snapping up. "Medical expenses? Greg's health is fine." "Precisely," Anya said. "If you will now turn to Exhibit B, you will see the digital authorization trail. Each transfer was approved using Mr. Greg Duke's digital signature. However, the IP logs show these authorizations did not originate from Mr. Duke's devices. They originated, without exception, from an IP address hardwired to Mrs. Crestwood's private study in the Aspen residence." Vivian's face was white. "Mrs. Crestwood's defense, we anticipate," Anya continued, "is that this was a family arrangement, that she was acting as her husband's agent, with his full knowledge and oral consent. To quote her directly, that she operated a dual authorization structure. I would like to play for the board a recording, made yesterday, in which Mrs. Crestwood details this structure herself." Anya pressed a key on her laptop. The room filled with the sound of Vivian's voice. "Of course, Greg gave me all his passwords years ago. He cannot even remember his own birthday. Someone has to be the adult in the room." My father sank lower in his chair, his eyes shut. "It is a reallocation of assets, Isabel. When that company goes public, all of this money will be returned to the trust, tenfold. It is a simple bridge loan." "Arthur Davies? Arthur is a bean counter. I upped his advisory fee by 20% last year. He understands the new structure." The audio clicked off. The silence was deafening. Arthur Davies looked like he was going to vomit. Judge Muller was staring at Vivian with an expression of pure, cold disgust. "This is an outrage," Vivian's lawyer blustered, but his voice was weak. "My client was being recorded illegally, under duress." "Colorado is a one-party consent state," Anya said, her voice like ice. "My client was a participant. The recording is fully admissible, but perhaps this is more clear." Anya nodded to her associate. The large monitor on the wall, previously dark, lit up. It was the grainy, time-stamped footage from the hidden camera. We all watched. We saw Vivian, sharp and commanding. We saw Arthur Davies, trembling, wringing his hands. We heard her voice, not a recording, but a live, captured moment of coercion. "The charter," the video version of Vivian said, "is my husband's concern, not yours. You are paid to process, not to opine. Sign it." The video froze on the image of Arthur Davies's shaking hand signing the fraudulent transfer. "My God, Ms." Cho whispered, pushing her chair back from the table. This is theater," Vivian finally exploded, her voice cracking. "A performance. You are twisting my words. I was protecting my husband. I was protecting this family." "Protecting him?" Anya asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Mr. Duke, do you have the statement you prepared?" My father's hand was shaking so badly he could barely lift the file. He fumbled, and the papers scattered across the table. I watched him, my heart a cold, hard stone. This was his moment. He could fold. He could run. He took a deep, ragged breath. He looked at Vivian, his eyes filled with a new, unfamiliar mixture of terror and resolve. He gathered the papers. "This," he said, his voice a reedy whisper, "is my sworn affidavit." Anya took it. "For the board," she said. "Mr. Duke attests that he was manipulated into signing blank authorization forms, that he abdicated his fiduciary duty out of fear of his wife, and that he had no knowledge of the creation of Crestwood Holdings or the transfers made in his name." "He is lying!" Vivian shrieked, half rising from her chair. "You are coercing him. He is a weak, sick man." "He is prepared to sign it again," Anya said. "Here, in front of all of us, and in front of a notary, who is waiting outside." Anya placed a fresh copy of the affidavit and a pen in front of my father. He picked up the pen. His hand was trembling, the pen tip vibrating against the paper. He looked at Vivian. Her eyes were burning into him, a silent command to stop, to deny, to break. He held her gaze, and then, with a sharp, ragged exhale, he signed his name. The signature was spidery, uneven, but it was done. He dropped the pen as if it were on fire. He had finally chosen. "This is not..." Vivian slammed her fist on the walnut table, the sound cracking through the room. "What it looks like. I was protecting our assets. Trent's company is a golden opportunity. I was protecting this family from itself, from his weakness." "Mrs. Crestwood," Anya said, her voice rising for the first time, sharp as a gavel. "You are not a protector. You are a predator, and Mr. Hartman, my client's grandfather, provided for this exact contingency. If you will all turn to Exhibit G, the Conduct and Integrity Addendum, filed in 2008. Anya read the clause aloud, the willful self-dealing or gross mismanagement line. "By your own admission on that recording," Anya said, "you have triggered this clause. Your authority, and by extension, Mr. Duke's, is void. The addendum stipulates 3 immediate, non-negotiable consequences. First, the automatic and permanent disqualification of any and all involved trustees from any future role. You are banned from this trust for life. Second, the immediate restitution, the full repayment of all misappropriated funds. And third, the immediate appointment of an independent auditor." Vivian's mask did not just crack. It shattered. The blood drained from her face, leaving behind a sallow, papery-thin skin. She was breathing in short, sharp gasps. It was in that moment I felt a small, hesitant touch on my hand. I looked down, under the table. Sabrina, who had been silent, had slid her hand next to mine. She was pale, her eyes red, but she looked at me. She gently, tentatively, took my hand. Her fingers were freezing. She leaned toward me, her voice so quiet only I could hear it. "I am sorry, Izzy," she whispered. Her voice was broken, but it was real. "I am so sorry." A small, fractured moment of truth, a bond that was shattered, but perhaps not entirely gone. I squeezed her hand, once, then let it go. The funds were an investment, Trent stammered, his voice cracking with panic. A bridge loan, my mother said. They were to be repaid. My grandfather, Harold, who had been silent for the entire meeting, finally spoke. His voice was not loud, but it silenced the room. Repaid, he rumbled. He slid a single sheet of paper down the polished table. It glided to a stop in front of Judge Mueller. This is an email from my bank, received this morning. It confirms a direct $50,000 transfer from Crestwood Holdings to a personal, offshore account held by Mr. Trent Duke. It was used to purchase a vehicle 2 days ago. Does that seem like an investment for the trust, Mr. Duke? Or does it seem like the proceeds of a crime? Trent made a small, strangled sound. The boardroom erupted. Judge Mueller threw the paper down. This is unconscionable. Ms. Cho was on her feet. This is felony fraud. Harold, we have to call the police. Now. Vivian was gone. The woman in the chair was a hollowed-out shell. She was staring at nothing, her face a slack, empty mask of total and absolute ruin. The room was chaos. The lawyers were shouting. The board members were demanding action. My grandfather raised his hand. Silence, instantly. He turned his head, his sharp blue eyes cutting through the noise. He looked past Anya, past my father. He looked directly at me. Isabel, he said. His voice was calm, a solid block of granite in the center of the storm. The board, I believe, will follow my recommendation, and my recommendation will be yours. You are the one who opened the box. You will be the one to close it. What is the outcome you want? Every head turned to me. Vivian, my father, Trent, Anya. The entire room was holding its breath. He had given me the gavel. He had given me the power of life and death over the woman who had tormented me for 2 decades. I could send her to prison. I could destroy her. I stood up. My voice was steady. It did not shake. Transparency, I said, my voice clear in the cold room. First, a full, independent, forensic audit of the entire Mount Vale Fund, going back 10 years. I looked at Ms. Cho and Judge Mueller. Second, full and immediate repayment of every stolen dollar, $540,000, from Mrs. Crestwood and Mr. Duke's personal assets. I looked at Trent, including a full clawback of all funds improperly diverted to his startup. Finally, I looked at Vivian. She was watching me, her eyes dead. I do not want a trial, I said. I want the truth. I want accountability. I want the fund's integrity restored. That is the outcome: repayment, audit, and transparency. I sat down. Anya smiled. A small, tight, satisfied smile. My grandfather studied me for a long, silent moment. Then he nodded. So be it, he said. My proposed outcome hung in the air. Cold and final. Transparency, repayment, audit. Vivian, who had been a statue of shattered pride, let out a short, choked laugh. It was a terrible, dry sound, like stones rattling in a tin can. Repayment? She sneered, her voice clawing its way back. Audit? You foolish girl. You cannot just demand things. The trust is still controlled by its trustees, by Greg, by me. Your evidence is a family squabble. The board. She looked at Mueller and Cho. We'll see this for what it is, a hysterical, childish tantrum. We will handle this internally. We will, of course, review the accounts. She was rebuilding her fortress. She was right, legally. My demands were just that, demands. The board could vote, but the power still technically rested with the trustees. My father and, through him, her. She was counting on the inertia of power, on the reluctance of the board to incinerate the family's public image. Mrs. Crestwood, Anya said, her voice dropping, You seem to be operating under a severe misapprehension. I am operating under the full authority of the trust charter, Vivian snapped, her confidence returning, a feverish, desperate flush. Something your unstable client clearly has not even read. On the contrary, Anya said, she is the only one in this room who understands it. Gentlemen, Ms. Cho, if you will turn to the final document in your report, Exhibit H, the addendum of succession, filed 2 years ago. Anya held up her own copy. It was a single sheet of paper, embossed with my grandfather's private seal. After the Hartman versus Cole litigation in 2008, Anya announced, Mr. Harold Hartman filed a secret, binding codicil to the trust. It was designed to act as a fail-safe against precisely this kind of internal malfeasance. It states, and I quote, in the event that the primary trustees are found, by verifiable evidence, to have engaged in willful self-dealing or gross mismanagement. She paused, letting the words hang. This clause, Anya continued, is not just punitive, it is executive. It states that upon confirmation of such malfeasance, all signatory and managerial authority of the sitting trustees is immediately, and without further review, suspended. Vivian stopped breathing. And, Anya said, delivering the final, killing blow. It stipulates that all monitoring, auditing, and transitional authority for the Mount Vale Fund shall be transferred, immediately and in full, to a designated successor monitor, who shall hold said power for a term of no less than 5 years. Successor? Monitor? Trent stammered, his face ashen. Who? Who is it? Vivian's lawyer was flipping through his copy of the report, his hands shaking. This is irregular. We were never informed of this codicil. It was a sealed document, Anya said, known only to Mr. Hartman and the Trust's holding bank. It was set to be triggered by a specific, verifiable event, a key, if you will. She looked at me. I reached into my pocket and retrieved the matte black USB drive. I placed it on the polished walnut table. It sat next to the empty velvet box I'd brought with me. The codicil's trigger, Anya said, was the presentation of confirmed evidence of the fraud by the designated successor, the USB drive, containing the case file compiled by Mr. Hartman himself and verified by my client, constitutes that evidence. The trigger is now pulled. The clause is active. As of this moment, Mrs. Crestwood and Mr. Duke have no authority over the Mount Vale Fund. Vivian made a sound, a low guttural noise of pure primal negation. And who, Judge Mueller asked, his voice heavy, is the designated successor monitor? Anya smiled. As of 2 years ago, Mr. Hartman designated Ms. Isabel Duke. Vivian moved. It was not a planned action. It was a raw, reptilian instinct. She lunged across the table, her red nails bared like claws. Not at me, but at the document in Anya's hand. No, that is a lie. It is a forgery. She never made it. A man I had not even registered, standing by the door in a dark suit, moved with terrifying speed. He was not a boardroom associate. He was Harold's personal security. He caught her arm in a steel grip, his other hand pressing flat against her shoulder, forcing her back into her chair with a heavy, humiliating thud. "Get your hands off me," she shrieked. But it was not a command. It was a wail. The sound of a queen being dragged from her throne. The sound of total, unrecoverable panic. The woman who had built an empire on icy control, on flawless public composure, was gone. In her place was a feral, terrified animal, trapped and exposed. Harold Hartman finally spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Your financial power of attorney over any and all Hartman and Duke assets is revoked, effective immediately. He looked at his own lawyer. See to it. He then looked at Trent, whose face was a mask of waxy disbelief. Mr. Duke, your startup's funding pipeline is, as you heard, terminated. You will return the $50,000 you borrowed by the end of this week, or I will file the criminal complaint for the offshore account myself. You will sell the car. You will be removed from any and all positions in the family's holding companies. You will receive a basic living stipend, nothing more. He turned to my father. My father looked up, his face a ruin of shame. Greg, you have disgraced my daughter's memory. You have disgraced your own name. Your signatory rights are suspended for 12 months. You will enter a therapeutic program for your conduct. You will take a personal finance and ethics course. A full audit will be conducted on your personal accounts. If you comply, fully, we will revisit your role in 1 year. If you do not, you will be removed from the family charter entirely. My father just nodded, his eyes closed, tears seeping from beneath the lids. Finally, Harold looked at Sabrina, who was still holding my hand under the table, trembling. Sabrina, he said, his voice softening by a fraction. You were a fool. You were a willing beneficiary of a system you knew was corrupt. Even if you did not understand the details, your supplementary allowance is terminated. You will retain your primary, smaller inheritance. Conditional. On your full and truthful cooperation with Ms. Duke and the auditors. Do you understand? Yes, grandfather, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I understand. Good. Harold looked at the 2 independent board members. Judge Mueller, Ms. Cho, I trust these immediate actions are satisfactory? Ms. Cho nodded, her face grim. They are, Harold, but the vote remains. The board must formally ratify the succession and the audit. Then let us vote, Harold said. All in favor, Judge Mueller said, his voice booming in the quiet room, of ratifying the addendum of succession, appointing Ms. Isabel Duke as successor monitor, and initiating the full independent audit as she has outlined? Judge Mueller raised his hand. Ms. Cho raised her hand. My grandfather raised his hand. I raised my hand. Opposed? Vivian's lawyer, Trent, and Arthur Davies sat frozen, hands on the table. Vivian just stared. The motion passes, Judge Mueller said, 4-0, with 3 abstentions. Miss Duke, you are now in control of the fund. Vivian began to laugh. It was the same high, terrible, breaking sound from the library. Control? She shrieked, her voice echoing in the walnut-paneled room. She controls nothing. She is a thief. I built this. I managed Greg. I managed the money. I made this family run. I did all the work. I did. And that girl, she just walks in and steals it all. I looked at her. I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just the end. I reached across the table. I picked up the small, wine-red velvet box. I placed it in the center of the table, on the polished wood, where everyone could see it. This was your gift, Vivian, I said, my voice quiet. You panicked when you saw it. You knew it was a trace. You knew it was the one thing you did not control. I looked at my grandfather. Grandfather's gift was not for me, I said. It was for the truth. Harold looked at Vivian. His eyes were not angry. They were filled with a cold, ancient weariness. I knew, he said, his voice a low rumble. From the first year, I knew you were a fraud. I saw the bank errors. I saw the consulting fees. I watched you lie about my own daughter's jewelry. I knew what you were. Vivian's face crumpled. You knew? I knew, he said, but the truth is a weapon, and power is a burden. I was waiting for Isabel, for my granddaughter to be strong enough to see you, to fight you, and to carry that burden herself. I was waiting for her to be strong enough to open the box. He nodded toward the small, empty velvet container. Vivian stared at it, the box I had received, the power it contained. She lurched stammered to her feet. The security guard moved, but she just stumbled backward, her hand at her throat. She looked around the table at the faces staring at her. The judge, the board member, her broken husband, her terrified stepdaughter, her ruined son. She, the woman who had orchestrated the entire spectacle of gifts, the woman who had publicly humiliated me. She was the one. She was the only one in the family who had received no gift at all. Vivian's defeat was not a quiet surrender. It was a final, reflexive act of self-destruction. When Anya placed the formal repayment and resignation agreement on the polished walnut table, Vivian, who had been sitting in a state of catatonic shock, simply looked at it. Her lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. She looked up at me, her eyes dead. "No," she said. Her voice was a dry rattle. "I will not sign. I will see you all in hell." She stood up. Her lawyer, panicked, tried to stop her. "Vivian, do not be insane. We must negotiate." "Negotiate?" She laughed, a high, broken sound. "With her? She has destroyed my family. Let her destroy the rest of it." She swept out of the room. Trent, looking like a child, scrambled to follow her, leaving Arthur Davies and their stunned lawyer behind. Anya did not flinch. She watched the door close. She looked at me, at Harold, and at the board. So be it. She picked up her phone. She did not leave the room. She made the call right there, in front of us. "Yes, Mr. Hanratty," she said, her voice clear and cold, to the person on the other end. "The defendant has refused the pretrial settlement. We are green. File the complaint with the Pitkin County prosecutor. File the emergency injunction for the asset freeze. File everything. Yes, now." She hung up. The system, once engaged, moved with brutal, impersonal speed. By the time Vivian's car reached the gates of the estate, the Pitkin County Financial Crimes Unit, acting on the injunction, had already frozen every known asset tied to Crestwood Holdings. Her accounts were locked, her credit lines severed. My first act as successor monitor, signed and executed before I even left the boardroom, was to appoint the independent auditor. I did not hire the family's tame accounting firm. I hired a forensic team out of New York, sharks who specialized in high-net-worth fraud. I gave them Harold's USB and a simple directive: find it all. They did not just confirm my findings. They found more. The $540,000 was just the surface rot. The audit, completed in a single, surgical week, uncovered 2 more shell companies, both registered in Delaware, both tied directly to Trent. He had been using his startup as a mechanism to wash the money Vivian stole, taking seed capital from the trust, then paying one of his shell companies for consulting, and then transferring that money back to a private account held by Vivian. It was not just theft. It was a sophisticated, ongoing conspiracy. Trent was not just a spoiled beneficiary. He was an active partner. Armed with the new audit, the Mount Vale Board, now led by me, issued the formal clawback order. It was no longer a request. It was a judgment. We went after Vivian's personal assets, her share of the Aspen estate, her art collection, her New York penthouse. A court order placed a partial lien on everything she owned. While the legal and financial fires burned, my grandfather formalized the new order. In the quiet of the library, just me and him, he signed the final, binding document. "Isabel Duke," it read, "is hereby appointed acting trust supervisor for the Mount Vale Fund, with full and total authority, for a term of 5 years. He slid the paper across the desk. It was done. The family I had known dissolved, each member facing their own private reckoning. My father found me 2 days later, standing on the terrace. He looked like a man who had not slept in a year. "Izzy," he began, his voice thick. I know sorry is a useless word. I know I failed you, every day of your life. But what you did, in that room, you saved the fund. You saved me from prison. I am leaving tomorrow." Leaving? To a program, in Arizona, a therapy program, for men like me, weak men. I have to try. He was crying, silent, ugly tears of shame. "I just want to ask, is there any chance, Isabel, someday, for me to earn my way back? Not into the family, just into your life." I looked at him. The rage I had held for him for 20 years was gone. He was not a monster. He was just a hollow space, a man defined entirely by his own fear. "I do not know," I said honestly, "but if you want to try, this is how it starts." I had already laid out the conditions. The therapy program was first. It was not optional. Second, he would be required to take basic financial literacy courses. He would learn, at the age of 60, how to read a bank statement and a trust charter. And third, when he was released, he would perform 100 hours of community service. He would work, personally, at the food bank in Denver that the Mount Vale Fund was supposed to be supporting. "I will do it," he whispered, nodding. "I will do all of it." Sabrina was next. She came to my room the night before she flew back to New York. She was holding her phone. I do not know if this helps," she said, her voice small. "But I saved everything, every text, every message from Mom about the arrangement with your credit card, every voice note from Trent, bragging about how they were outsmarting Grandpa." She handed me the phone. She had become the key witness. "Sabrina, why?" "Because she lied," she said, her eyes flashing with a spark of her own anger. "She told me you knew. She made me think you were the cold one, and she was the one protecting me. She used me. She used both of us." She looked at me, her face pale. "I am sorry, Izzy, for all of it, for the money, for everything." I did not have forgiveness for her, not yet. It was too soon, the wounds too deep. But I had understanding. She was a victim, same as me, just a different kind. I pulled her into an awkward hug. It was brittle, fragile, but it was not a lie. "Be safe, Sabrina," I said. "Call me when you land." We had chosen truth. It was a start. Trent did not get a conversation. He did not get a second chance. The audit had exposed him as a co-conspirator. The clawback order was absolute. When his investors, seeing the fraud investigation, pulled their funding, his startup imploded in less than 24 hours. He had to sell the Patek watch. He had to sell the Range Rover. I watched from the library window as he loaded his designer clothes into the back of a rented U-Haul trailer. He was moving out of the penthouse. He saw me watching. He did not glower. He did not look angry. He just looked broken. A 30-year-old child who had finally, catastrophically, run out of other people's money. Vivian's war lasted exactly 2 weeks. Her expensive DOC lawyers filed motion after motion, but the evidence, the audio confession, the video of the accountant, my father's sworn affidavit, Sabrina's text messages, and the ironclad audit was a tsunami. The Pitkin County District Attorney was preparing a formal criminal indictment for racketeering. Faced with a criminal trial she could not win, and the very real prospect of a federal prison sentence, she finally broke. She appeared in court on a gray, cold morning. She wore a simple, pale gray suit. She looked small, old. There was no trial. She accepted the deal. She signed the civil liability agreement. Admitting to the fraud and conspiracy, she agreed to liquidate her entire personal portfolio, her New York penthouse, her art, her stocks, to repay the $540,000, plus penalties and interest. In exchange, the DA reduced the criminal charges to a single, lesser felony, with a sentence of probation and community service. She was not in jail, but she was ruined, socially, financially, and permanently. She was a pariah. That night, the storm was over. The Aspen mansion was quiet. We gathered in the library, not in the cold, cavernous grand hall, in the warm, small library. It was just me, Harold, my father, who was leaving for his therapy program in the morning, and Sabrina, who had flown back in. No one spoke for a long time. Then Harold stood. He walked not to the bar, but to the massive, old painting of the maroon bells that hung over his desk. He swung it open, revealing a hidden, heavy steel safe. He turned the heavy, clicking dial. The safe opened. He reached inside and took out a single, heavy, antique brass key. He walked over to me. He did not smile. He just looked at me. his eyes clear and sharp. "The velvet box was the test," he said, his voice a low rumble, "to see if you were strong enough to find the truth." He placed the heavy key in my hand. It was cold and solid. "This," he said, "is the key, the master key to the fund's vault, to the original charter, to everything." I held it. It was not a gift of wealth. It was a gift of responsibility. I stood and walked to the balcony, the cold, clean mountain air stinging my face. I looked out at the silent, snow-covered peaks. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Anya. "It is done," I said. I saw the court filings. Her voice was warm. "Congratulations, Supervisor Duke." "One last thing," I said. "That scholarship, the Mount Vale Scholarship for the children of the old mine workers, the one Vivian kept delaying because the applicants were not high-profile enough." "I remember it," Anya said. "Activate it," I said. "Tonight, double the endowment, and I want you to rewrite the charter, remove all the dirty conditions, make it about merit, not about who they know." "Consider it done," she said. I hung up. I looked down at the heavy key in my hand. I went back inside. The wine-red velvet box was still sitting on the kitchen table, where a staff member had moved it during the chaos. It was just an empty, discarded object now. I finally understood. My grandfather had given me the one gift I had spent my entire life begging for, the one thing I never had: the power to say no, and the right to protect myself. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you want to show some extra support, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.